Okay, Rabotai, thank you for joining us. We are continuing the Chatzar Yosef. We want to finish this one section, B'ezrat Hashem, chapter 15, section 2. We've been talking about a city called Beitar. Beitar was a city, a large, illustrious, glorious city that was situated in Eretz Israel, but tragically it was destroyed, run down by the Romans in a massacre that was shortly after the second temple was destroyed, second Beit HaMikdash. The Gemara in Masechet Gittin gives the account of it. We're learning about one section of that Gemara right now. Let's read it again. It's on page 231. In English it says, regarding the war that ensued, the war that led to the destruction of the city of Beitar, the Chachamim expounded the following verse. The pasuk is in Eicha 2:3. It says, he has cut off in his anger all the horn of Israel, called Keren Israel. He cut them all off. Let's talk about Hashem. That's a poetic way of describing how Hashem caused the destruction of Beitar. We explained in the first, 5 videos? I believe this is video number 6 of this series. First 5 videos we explained all about that. Please look back there about what it means, what the horn means, the keren. It's a very deep concept. Rabbi Zera says in the name of Rabbi Abahu, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the following, that this pasuk, this verse that we just quoted, is referring to the 80,000 horns of war who entered the city of Beitar at the time that the enemy took it. Horns of war is talking about the trumpets of the enemy. They used to blow trumpets in order to instill fear of the enemy. And they killed in it men, women, and children until their blood went and fell into the Yam HaGadol, the great sea. So the Gemara is giving this imagery of the blood of all these victims, Jewish victims, flowing and pouring into the ocean, the great sea, Yam HaGadol, which is the term usually used to refer to the Mediterranean Sea. And the Gemara says, lest you say that the city of Beitar was close to the sea, and that's how it spilled into it, you should know that it was not. It was away from the sea, the distance of a mil, says the Gemara. 1 mil is a halachic measurement of length, and it equates to about a little bit less than 1 kilometer, which is a little bit less than a mile. We are in page 241, talking about this Gemara in the book. We explain here in the Chatzar Yosef that the explanation provided by the Maharal about the spilling of the blood into the Great Sea. What did he say about that? Let's revisit. That's been several weeks since we did that. I'm just going to skip back to the Maharal, which is on page 232, where he comments on this. He explains what this whole means, this means with the sea and the blood. He says over here, regarding the traveling of the blood towards the Great Sea, this was also a supernatural occurrence. Beitar intended to plant themselves firmly with great fortification. The Maharal's whole theme here in his commentary on this Gemara was that Beitar, they possessed a certain beracha, certain blessing from heaven. What was that? The blessing of fortification, of having a very strong physical stronghold. It was a very big, beautiful, illustrious city with walls and architecture. They were planted deep into the not deep, but firmly into the ground. Beitar intended to plant themselves firmly with great fortification, but ironically, by the end of this military conflict with Rome, not even a root or branch of them remained. Since even women and children were killed, as our Gemara says. The blood spilling into the sea symbolizes the complete erasure of the people of the city. Not even their blood remained in the city. He's trying to say that they tried so hard to take advantage of their bracha of fortification, to make their city long-lasting, to build the integrity of their city there, and nevertheless, the complete opposite happened. Not even the blood of the people remained there. It went into the ocean, went into the water. Water represents erasing something. The Maharal says in another place that when something goes in water, right? Many times the Torah, the Bible, the Tanakh explains instances where God punished people with water. We have Noach, we have the Egyptian soldiers that followed Am Yisrael into the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, whatever, the Red Sea, Reed Sea, and they got washed away in there. Also the army of Sisera in the book of Shoftim, who were pursuing the Jewish army. They also got washed away in water. So that represents an erasure. When you want to erase something and start anew, and erase what was there before, use water. That's what he's saying also here regarding Beitar, that their blood even went into the water. That's what the Gemara means. This was exactly the opposite of what the people had in mind when fortifying the city. This is the general rule for something that is planted with the intent of great strength and fortification. Whilst it is standing and established, it is very strong. But once it's uprooted, it is completely obliterated to the point where nothing remains. That's how he explains our Gemara. So he's saying that when our Gemara says it was all their blood went into the ocean and that it was a distance of a mile away from the city, it's not meant to be taken literally, it's metaphoric to teach you that point. That's what the Maharal wants to explain. So the Maharal, his explanation was that the Great Sea exemplifies how they were completely and utterly destroyed. It's very nice, and Chazak Baruch, I'm not saying it's untrue, but it seems, in our humble opinion, a little bit incomplete, that explanation. Since the ruins of the city still remained, something remained there, I'm sure the buildings were there, right? As well as the bodies of the victims, the bodies were there, the blood's gone, but their bodies were there. As we know famously, as we see in the next section, what the city of Beitar is famous for is connected to Birkat HaMazon. One of the blessings of Birkat HaMazon was established because of these people and because of their dead bodies, as we'll see in the next section, without giving away too much. But we know their dead body was there for a long time. Right? It remained there for about 3 years, says the Gemara, only after which the Jews were given permission to go and bury them. So, therefore, it seems incomplete to say that all traces of the city and its people were completely gone forever. That was what the Maharal was trying to say. We may expand the Maharal's explanation with what we have established thus far in this chapter. So again, you have to know what we talked about up to this point in all the previous videos, and the themes that we were trying to portray about leadership, about the mistakes of Nadab and Avihu, who had the same mistakes of the people of Beitar, who was not the mistake, Rabbi Akiva was able to overcome this mistake. Right? We went through several examples. We brought a Pirkei Avot. So all of that, building up to this point, the people of Beitar were undoubtedly a special bunch. We cannot deny that. Look at note 58. As the Ben Yehoyada will point out further in the next section of this chapter, he's going to show how special they were. Sorry, 58, right? Yeah. And in this chapter, we're also trying to explain that they were very deep Kabbalistic, and they were in their minhagim, their customs were connected to the high spiritual realms. Mystical knowledge was ingrained in their social norms, societal norms, as we explained. They utilized the avenues of transcendence, of going beyond the physical, connecting to the spiritual. Those high-powered horns that we spoke about throughout all this whole chapter. The horns, again, you have to look back. I don't want to go into it now and digress. We spoke about the depth of the horns. They were utilizing those powers of the horns, making way for an incredibly special civilization indeed. It is no wonder that an entire blessing was added by Chazal, by the Chachamim, to the mother of all blessings, which is Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, on account of the people of Beitar. Look at number 59. Birkat HaMazon is the only beracha commanded by the Torah itself. Only blessing that we have to say from the Torah itself, with the exception of the blessing of learning Torah, which is subject to debate whether or not it's also Deoraita. Whereas all other blessings that we say, which are many other blessings, they're established by Chachamim midrabanan as by way of Birkat HaMazon. Meaning they understood that God wants us to say blessings because God told us to say Birkat HaMazon in the Torah itself, verse in the Torah. Therefore they said, just like God wants us to appreciate this, we have to appreciate everything else He does. So that every other bracha we say was enacted by the rabbis, by the Chachamim of the Gemara, by Anshe Knesset Gedolah actually, based on that. And one of the blessings, the Birkat HaMazon has a few blessings in it, as part of the whole corpus of Birkat HaMazon. And the last one is Hatov Metiv. When the Jews were given permission to bury the victims of Beitar after a little over 3 years, right after they were massacred, the Romans did not allow the Jews to go take their bodies to bury them for 3 years. Finally, after 3 years, they got permission. They came in, they saw the bodies. What would you expect to see? Rotting, flies buzzing around everywhere, maggots eating flesh, horrible stench. They didn't find that. The bones would be there.
The bones, I'm saying, yeah, but not like the flesh. At that point, all that would be gone, no? 3 years?
3 years
Weather,
outside with
rain, this, that,
with sun and rain and animals, and yeah, probably most of it would be gone, but it still would smell probably horrible. But again, we're talking about a lot of people. You know? Anyway, let's see over here. What they found was that the bodies did not rot. A miracle was done. The bodies did not rot. As a result, Chazal instituted the fourth blessing of Birkat HaMazon, which is praising God for being what's called Hatov v'Hametiv, the one who is good and the one who does good. Is good and does good. Tov v'Metiv. Two different points we're thanking God for.
When you say does not rot, that means like they still look the same, just bloody, whatever, but still the same.
That's what I presume it means. Yes, I presume it means that the bodies were intact. It wasn't rotting. The injuries that they sustained from the massacre was probably still there, but they didn't rot as much as you expect. The two goods here, Tov and Metiv, two types of good that we're blessing God on. They are, number one, that the Jews were given permission, first of all, to go and bury the bodies. We thank God for that. And number two, that the bodies did not rot after so long. This becomes cannier, or a little more interesting, based on what we have established here in this chapter. The people of Beitar excelled in self-transcendence. That's what we kept trying to say. They were experts at connecting with the higher realms, going beyond the physical, on a personal level. Which is likely why their individual bodies were so holy and did not rot for so long, right? We have that principle that is brought up in Chazal and other places as well. That a very holy body, a person who's a very holy person, their body does not rot. There's been many stories about certain tzaddikim that were dug up after many years, and they didn't rot whatsoever. The famous story of the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar, that when he died, he told his wife to put his body up in the attic and don't bury me, and don't tell anyone that I died. And she listened to him, and I believe it was something like 20 years. His body was up there. After how long? Maybe it was 12 years. I forgot. It was a long time. His body was up in the attic. Not only that, people would come with a lot of questions, not knowing he died, and they asked through the wife. Please go ask the rabbi. She always said he's busy, he's not available. So they said, okay, ask the rabbi this question. So she would go to the door of the attic and she would say, this is the question. And she would hear an answer. She heard halachic answers. And she went and relayed it back to the person who was asking for a long time. And finally, one day she came in. His body was pristine. Not rot whatsoever. Did not rot whatsoever. With the exception of, after many years, she saw one worm in his ear. A maggot was in his ear. Then he came to her in a dream. He explained to her, don't worry. That worm is giving me the proper atonement because one time in my life I heard something that I didn't protest to. I should have protested, I didn't protest.
Was he eventually buried?
Eventually he was buried, yes. Eventually he was buried. Where was he buried? He was buried in the same plot as his father, famously in Meron.
Why would somebody not want to be buried?
I don't know. You got to ask Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. When he's reborn, you ask him, why didn't you? I guess based on the context of the story of the Gemara, there, he knew that his answers and his expertise in Torah, whatever that meant, would be needed in the community. He was answering questions through the door, somehow, for years after that. That's a very deep story. It requires its own Chatzar Yosef, maybe one day. But the point is why I'm saying that we see plenty of sources that Chachamim don't rot. And we see that the people of Beitar, all the people, 3 years didn't rot. It's not for nothing. They were holy.
Is it? The maggots, all that's for the sins, right?
Yes. It's atoning the sins of the body throughout the years,
so
yes.
Assume that they were almost sinless? Or are we saying that because they were just able to transcend the physical?
Both. It goes hand in hand. I want to say they were sinless. It's hard to say anybody is sinless.
Okay.
But they were very, very refined. Put it that way. Spiritually refined. And that's what we kept saying over and over, that there was individually spiritually refined. But then again, their mistake was, I don't know if I'm going to say it here, their mistake was that they didn't connect with Am Yisrael, with the nation, as they should have. They weren't the proper role models to connect with them and lift them up as well. They sort of neglected that. And because of that, because of their high level, they deserve such a punishment. And we're explaining over here now further. The people of Beitar excelled in self-transcendence, which is likely why their individual bodies were so holy and did not rot for so long. But what good was it since they are all dead? What's the good of being so? What's the benefit of being so good at being self-transcendent having the individualized, personalized power to connect with God on a high level, what's the benefit if Am Yisrael is not benefiting from it? The stinking truth is that they were no different alive than when they were dead. How is that? They were individually pure, but collectively lifeless. Deep way of thinking about it. The bodies were pure, but what good is it? We're not. Am Yisrael wasn't benefiting. Such potential wasn't transferred into actuality. Their connection with the upper realms came at the cost of the severance of their connections between each other, evident by their political divisiveness as well. As we said before, there's a lot of political division between them.
When they connected to the upper realms, what did they do?
My point was they lived on a very high spiritual plane, always doing all their little things as a Kabbalist would do, so to speak.
Like when they would pray, would they pray for the welfare of all of Israel? Or they would
I don't know how they prayed. What they prayed for. I'm not sure. Maybe the Kabbalah, at that point tefillot were established, yes. So you have to say they prayed tefillah, but what was their kavanah? Even though the tefillah is written in a language of plural us, anachnu, nevertheless, if a person has kavanah about himself all the time, the kavanah takes precedence. So the transcendence they aimed to achieve was greatly flawed. Their methods in achieving it was based on the chesed din rachamim relationship, as we explained way earlier. Our Gemara makes sure to mention that men, women, and children were killed by the enemy. Why? To convey that they received a measure for measure punishment. As sort of a small hint. Because chesed is male, as we explained. Din, which is judgment, is female. And rahamim, which is the perfect balance between the two, is the child that's produced between a male and a female. That's the perfect balance of chesed and din. That's the child. So, measure for measure, just as they used chesed, din, and rachamim only selfishly, also, therefore, the parts of their family that were represented by chesed, din, and rachamim, i.e., man, women, and child, as the Gemara mentions, were all slaughtered. So when our Gemara says that their blood traveled the distance of a mil to the great sea, it seems to be a figurative message rather than a literal statement. Look at number 60 over there on the bottom. Based on the likely locations of the ancient Beitar, as we explained before, there are certain cities, Batir and other places that scholars believe Beitar was at. The distance of Beitar to the Mediterranean Sea was much more than just a mil. Meaning those possible candidates of where Beitar actually was today is much further from the Mediterranean Sea than 1 mil. So when a Gemara says 1 mil, it must mean something metaphorically deeper, figurative. What does that mean? In the deeper wisdom, the concept of the sea is a broad, huge area of uncountability with no end in sight. Imagine looking at the horizon of an ocean. A transcendence beyond the physical realm. So it represents a certain level of transcendence, because when you look at it, there's no end. It's infinite in that way, from your perspective. The gematria, the numerical value of the word yam, which means sea, yud mem, is 50. 10 plus 40 is 50. Which is similar in concept to the number 8 as we explained above. We said that 8 is beyond the 7, right? We have the 10 sefirot, 10 emanations of light that God uses to manage the world. The lower 7 is the physical world. The upper 3 are sometimes combined as one unit, which is called the 8th. The upper 3 is the world of planning, world of thought. And that's above the physical, it's beyond the physical, it's intangible. Transcendence is into that realm. It's represented by the number 8. And the number 50 also is similar to that. How is that? I'll explain. The physical world is based on a system of 7 due to the influence of the lower 7 sefirot, as we explained. Everything, and that means everything. Everything means everything, including the sefirot themselves. Meaning each sefirah, the rule is that everything is ruled by the sefirot, including the sefirot. Which means each sefirah, each attribute of light that God uses to manage the world can be unpacked and opened up, and each one of them, inside each one, you're going to find 10 sefirot. again. And you take one of those out, you open it again, you find 10 sefirot. It's endless, it's infinite. It's what's called a fractal. Look up fractals. Fractal is a geometric term used to describe certain images where every smaller unit of that image looks the same as the entire image.
It's like infinite zoom, right?
Yes, infinite zoom. Like there's a certain, I forgot what it's called. There's a certain computerized image that they created where every time you zoom in on any point, it looks exactly the same because each unit builds up what a whole entire thing looks like. And there's fractals in real life as well. Did you know that? Look at a tree in the winter.
Okay.
You have a big trunk, and then you have medium-sized branches, and then tiny branches. If you zoom in on any one of those tiny branches and just align it, it'll be a tree. There'll be a major trunk and smaller branches.
Well, when you get up to the leaves, but
So it ends eventually. It's not endless, but you see the idea is there. Fractals. Also, what's another example? I think a leaf as well. A leaf of a tree, certain leaves. The more you zoom in, you see like the vein structure of the leaf. Also are fractals. Where else do you see fractals? Tree is the most obvious example. Oh, lightning bolts. A bolt of lightning. Take a flash of it, a picture, a screenshot, so to speak. Any place you zoom in, it looks just like the actual bolt of lightning from the original image. Lightning bolts. It's really an amazing thing. So again, why is that so? Because the units that God uses to create and manage the world work that way. The sefirot themselves, the fractals of themselves, endlessly. And since they're spiritual, they really are endlessly. So, however, that being said, in the holy books, when they're talking about a sefirah within a sefirah that's managing or affecting a certain part of the world at any given time, they usually don't go deeper than the first level. Even though they agree there's more levels, they usually talk about the first level, meaning what I mean by first is actually second, meaning you have the 10 and then the 10 within the 10. That's really usually where those are the ones that they talk about, that this affects that affects this. Going further, each of the lower sefirot, 7 sefirot, let's talk about the lower 7 now, have within them the 7 sefirot, yielding a total of how many? 49 elements of the physical. Meaning the 7 represents the physical world, what works in the physical world, and therefore 7 within 7 is what you have to do, because we're only focusing on physical. So 7 within 7, 7 times 7 is 49 elements total. Look at note 61. Each of these 49 elements of a sefirah within a sefirah of the lower 7 correspond to one of the 49 days counted during the Sefirat HaOmer between Pesach and Shavuot. And if you look at the Sfardi Sidurim, in that section of Sefirat HaOmer, each day they tell you which Sefirah you're in. Chesed sheba chesed, din sheba chesed, Tiferet sheba chesed, etc. That's the first week. The first week is one Sefirah, 7. The week of chesed. The second week is the week of Gevurah. Third week is the week of Tiferet. In each one of them, you get the point. Connect the dots. So 50 now is the level beyond the 49. The entrance into the infinite upper realm, into transcendence. Thus, 50 is to 49, much like 8 is to 7. We said 8 represents going beyond the 7 physical. Same idea when we say 50, because 50 represents going beyond the 49 physical. Because 7 physical is actually 49, because it's 7 within 7. The next level is 50. So our Gemara's description of the distance of a meal is used figuratively to connote a distant place, somewhere other than here. That's what meal means. In fact, the measurement of a meal is often used by Chazal, by the Chachamim, to represent a place that is beyond here, which creates many practical applications in halakha as well. Here's one famous example. Look at note 62. For example, there's a halakha that one must wash his hands before praying the Amidah. You have to find water and wash your hands. And one is expected to make a minimal effort to find water to do so. if one is stationed at one location, is not traveling, he's static, he's stationed, and he has to pray now, that minimal effort is defined as searching for water within a mil radius of his location, mil distance. Meaning if you don't have water here where you are now, you are required to travel up to the distance of a mil to get water to prepare yourself for a prayer, tefillah, to wash your hands. Thus, within a mil is considered here, because you could stay here. It's considered all here, so therefore it's not a big deal for you to look within a mil. It's still where you are. It's considered here in a certain sense, and beyond the mil is considered there, far away, another place, and therefore you don't have to. The Chachamim didn't obligate you to go so far to have to wash your hands before praying. Rather, you could just pray without washing your hands in that situation. If you can't get water within a mil, because mil is here, beyond the mil is not here anymore. It's somewhere else. If there is no water within a mil, one may use other methods to cleanse his hands, such as simply wiping them down. The concept of the mil does not apply to space, but also to time as well. There are plenty of examples in halakha where the time it takes for an average person to walk the distance of a mil, which is generally accepted to be 18 minutes by the Shulchan Aruch based on the Terumat edition, even though there's other opinions like 22 minutes and 24 minutes by the Rambam in two different places, but that's a discussion for another time. The accepted time is 18 minutes, is the amount of time it takes for a normal person to walk the distance of a mil. And that applies to many halachic things. It's a standard block of time and that it takes for something halachically significant to occur, such as the time it takes for resting dough to become chametz, leavened, and therefore non-kosher for Pesach. If you leave dough and let it rest for 18 minutes, it becomes chametz. That's the standard block of time. Mil, time it takes to walk a mil. And the time it takes for salt to remove blood from a raw meat as well. Minimum. B'di avad, if you had meat that was just shechted, fresh from the animal, and you salted it for 18 minutes, and then you washed it off, it's kosher. It's considered that it took all the blood out. The minhag is to leave it for about an hour. Thus, within this time frame, it is considered now in a certain sense, and beyond this time frame of walking a mil is considered later, beyond the here in terms of time. Bring it back to what we're talking about in the Gemara. When the Gemara says that their blood travels the distance of a mil, thus the message of Beitar's blood traveling the distance of a mil into the Great Sea reveals the reason for their destruction, as we've been saying this entire chapter, which is the following: their misguided practice of personal transcendence only to somewhere else. That's what transcendence means. Somewhere beyond the physical, somewhere else, somewhere beyond here. A place other than the physical here, into the place of where are they transcending into? Into the conceptual 50, which is the 8, which is beyond the 7, beyond the physical, at the expense of the group transcendence with their brethren. That's what they sacrificed, which they didn't focus on enough. The Gemara's imagery illustrates that the people of Beitar put their blood, literally their blood, all their efforts, that's what blood means, right? Damim means blood. All their efforts into achieving transcendence in order to reach the sea, the place of 50, beyond the physical. But as history would have it, it was a vain effort. So it's really one big, beautiful metaphor, in our humble opinion, and hint to their mistake, and for us to learn from. We have to connect with the people, Rabotai, especially in times like we're living in now. So that's section 2, Baruch Hashem, we finished it. It was only 3 paragraphs, but there was so much detail in there. Baruch Hashem. Next week, we're going to do section 3, hopefully, and that will be the last section on Beitar for now. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen.